Good day, everyone. I am Maria Corazon A. Prias from Pasay City East High School, and I will be your teacher for today's lesson. Our most essential competency is to identify and describe ionic and covalent compounds based on their chemical formula and chemical names, with the code Pasay S9 MT Q2-W2 Day 1. At the end of this video, you are expected to identify and describe ionic and covalent compounds based on their chemical formula and chemical names. Do you have any idea about it? If none, don't worry, I'm here to guide you in the process. Are you ready? Let's begin. Let's try to discover. Can you tell which object is having an ionic and covalent compounds? Like salt, water, muriatic acid, and magnesium oxide. Do you know how to identify them? Let's find out. Can you still remember what compound is from your previous lesson? Compounds are defined as substances containing two or more different chemical elements. They have a distinct chemical structures characterized by a fixed ratio of atoms held together by chemical bonds. Basically, there are two types of compounds. These are ionic and covalent compounds. The question is, what elements make an ionic and covalent compounds? Let's start with ionic compounds. Ionic compound is made from ionic bond. Ionic bonding occurs through a process called electron transfer, where one atom gives an electron. It is formed between a metal and a non-metal. Metal loses electron to become positively charged cation, whereas the non-metal accepts those electrons to become negatively charged anion. Let us consider the bond between sodium and chlorine atoms. There is a complete transfer of one electron from sodium to chlorine atom, changing both atoms into ions. During the process, the sodium has lost one electron to become a sodium positive ion, and chlorine has gained one electron to become a chloride ion. The compound form is ionic compound. On the other hand, a covalent compound is made from covalent bond. Covalent bonding occurs when a pairs of electrons are shared by atoms. Atoms will covalently bond with other atoms in order to gain stability gained by forming full electron shell. It is formed between two or more non-metal atoms. Covalent compounds do not contain ions, but instead consists only of discrete neutral molecules. Let us consider hydrogen and chlorine share electrons. To illustrate the Lewis structure, hydrogen has one dot, meaning has one valence electron, and chlorine has 7 dots, has 7 valence electrons. To satisfy the octet rule, each atom gives out one electron to share with each other, thus making a single bond. The bond is represented by a line. When two electrons or one pair of electrons are shared between atoms, it formed a single bond. When two atoms shared two pairs of electrons with each other, it formed a double bond. When three pairs of electrons are shared between two atoms in a molecule, it formed a triple bond. Here is a table of comparison to help you distinguish other properties of ionic and covalent compounds. 1. At room temperature and normal atmospheric pressure, ionic compound exists only as solid or stable crystalline structure like salt, whereas covalent compound exists as solid sugar, liquid water, and gas chlorine. 2. Ionic compound results in higher melting and boiling points, whereas covalent compound have lower melting and boiling points. And number 3, although solid ionic compound do not conduct electricity because there are no free mobile ions or electrons, ionic compounds that dissolve in water makes as electrically conductive solution. In contrast, covalent compounds do not exhibit any electrical conductivity, either in pure form or when dissolved in water. Ionic and covalent compounds can also be described by their chemical formula and chemical name. What is a chemical formula? Chemical formula provides a way to represent any chemical substance using the symbol of the elements present in it. Let's take a look at the most important tool used in chemistry, the periodic table. You can use the organization of the elements in the periodic table to predict how elements will form bond with each other.
Elements are classified as metals, nonmetals, and metalloids. The metals are those elements found on the left and central portions of the periodic table. The nonmetals are found on the right side of the periodic table. And between the metals and the nonmetals and found along the zigzag line is a third kind of elements called the semimetals or metalloids.
Generally, metals form positive ions called cations, and nonmetals form negative ions called anions. Atoms of group 1A or 1 lost one electron and form cation with a 1 plus charge like lithium. Atoms of group 2A or 2 lost 2 electrons and form cation with a 2 plus charge like beryllium, and so on. Aside from cations and anions, we have also polyatomic ions. Polyatomic ions are ions composed of more than one atom. The atoms in a polyatomic ions are usually covalently bonded to one another and therefore stay together as a single charge unit. For example, nitrate ion, NO3 1- contains 1 nitrogen atom and 3 oxygen atoms. Here are some of the examples of polyatomic ions with their charges. For example, if a compound is made from a metal and a nonmetal, its bonding will be ionic. Consider the chemical formula of NaCl. Sodium, Na is a metal. Chlorine, Cl, is a nonmetal. Therefore, NaCl is ionic compound. If a compound is made from 2 nonmetals, its bonding will be covalent. Consider the chemical formula or molecular formula CO2. Carbon C is a nonmetal. Oxygen O is a nonmetal. Therefore, CO2 is a covalent compound. Then we also have a metal and polyatomic ion to form ionic compound, like NaNO3. Sodium Na is a metal. Nitrate NO3 is a polyatomic ion. Therefore, NaNO3 is ionic compound. And nonmetal and polyatomic ion to form covalent compound, like H2SO4. Hydrogen H is a nonmetal. SO4 sulfate is a polyatomic ion. Therefore, H2SO4 is a covalent compound or covalent molecule. Let's try this. Which are ionic and covalent compounds? You are given 3 seconds. If your answer are the following, Fe2O3 and so on, you are correct. These are the ionic compounds. If your answer are the following, H2O and so on, you are also correct. These are the covalent compounds. Next, let's talk about chemical names. What is a chemical name? Chemical name is the scientific designation of a chemical in accordance with the nomenclature system developed by the International Union of Pure and Applied Chemistry, or IUPAC. To name the ionic compounds, the name of the metal from which the positive ion is formed, followed by the negative ion, adding IDE to the root name of the element name. Subscripts are not directly specified in the name. For covalent compounds, the rules are similar to those for naming ionic compounds. The less electronegative element is named first. However, the name of a covalent compounds include prefixes like di, tri, and others to indicate the number of atoms in the molecule.
To name the ionic compounds, consider the chemical formula NaCl. Na sodium, followed by Cl chlorine, adding IDE to the root name chlor. The chemical name is sodium chloride, or common name is table salt. Next, consider the chemical formula MgBr2. Mg magnesium, followed by Br bromine, adding IDE to the root name brom. The chemical name is magnesium bromide. For covalent compounds, consider the chemical formula N2O3. Prefixes are being used for N2, dinitrogen, for O3, trioxide. Therefore, the chemical name is dinitrogen trioxide. Next, consider the chemical formula NO. In here, we will not be using the prefix mono, but rather it will just be read as N nitrogen, O oxide. Therefore, the chemical name is nitrogen oxide. There is a note that the prefix mono is omitted when it refers to the first atom and is rarely used with the second atom.
Let's try this. Which are ionic and covalent compounds? You are given 3 seconds. If you answered barium chloride along with others, you are correct. These are the ionic compounds. If you answered dinitrogen oxide along with others, you are also correct. These are the covalent compounds. Now that you have learned how to identify and describe ionic and covalent compounds, can you now tell me which object is having an ionic and covalent compounds? Very good! Salt and magnesium oxide are ionic compounds, while muriatic acid and water are covalent compounds. Good job! Remember that compounds can be classified as ionic and covalent based on the nature of bonding. Ionic compound involves a metal and a non-metal, while covalent compound involves 2 non-metals. These compounds may be recognized in terms of the state of matter, melting point, boiling point, conductivity, chemical formula, and chemical name. And that ends our lesson for today. Did you understand it very well? If not, you may go back to the lesson presented in your module. If this lesson is clear to you, congratulations! You may now answer the exercises in your module. Good luck!